Dear friends, it's my pleasure to have with us today two really committed educationists of India. One is Bhaskaran Raman, who is the professor of computer science in IIT Mumbai. He's been working on this project in a very large scale, particularly with the COVID issues. And we have another educationist, Pankaj Das, who's also the president of Swarna Bharat Party. He is the director of the Modern English School in Guwahati. The idea today is to look at the impacts of COVID policies of India on the children who have been impacted by these policies. So we're going to look at really the school children today, including from kindergarten onwards. And to set the scene, let me outline the fact that in a recent report in December 2021, UNICEF and a number of other organizations looked at the data across the world and concluded that the lifetime earnings of the children who've gone through these COVID policies of lockdowns and so on, including studying from home, that their lifetime earnings would reduce by $17 trillion. Okay, it's not an amount to be laughed at. It's 14% of the current GDP of the world. We're looking at the largest single destruction of the future of children in human history. I call this the Great Hysteria. As you're aware, I've got a book on the topic. But I'm also working on a cost-benefit analysis with Professor Gigi Foster of New South Wales University, and that will be published hopefully in the coming weeks, where you'll get to see more details about the damage done in particularly in Australia, but all over the world. Right now, I want to move quickly to our guests. So over to you, Bhaskaran, first for an introduction, then over to you, Pankaj.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sanjeev Sablok, for inviting me to this session. My name is Bhaskaran Raman. I'm a faculty professor at the Indian Institute of Technology in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. I have a passion for teaching. I like teaching, although by profession, I am a college teacher. And since the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, I have been following data and various analysis related to COVID and the response to COVID. To me, the first lockdown, which was announced for 21 days in India, itself was unimaginable, because my thoughts went to what's going to happen to the crores and crores of tens of crores of hand-to-mouth existence people who earn daily wages, and that's how they sustain themselves. But unbelievably, this has been continuing for so long, and there's no talk of third lockdown. The school shutdown has been especially heart-wrenching part of this whole saga, even more so because so many other parts of the world, even where there has been lockdown, schools have been given priority, not so in India. So that's an especially difficult part for me to swallow. So that's what this session is going to be on. Thank you once again for calling me to this session.
Thank you, Bhaskaran. We look forward to hearing from you. And now, Pankaj.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Pankaj Das. I am the president of Swarna Bharat Party, a political party. We are working in the space of liberty, individual liberty. That is our main foundation. I have also worked my whole life in the school sector. I have been working in different roles in Modern English School in Kahilipara, Guwahati. I am also currently the president of All Assam Private Schools Association, although my tenure is actually over the time-wise, but we have been unable to hold the next session, the general body session, to elect a new body. So I'm still the president. So as I told you, I have been working in the school sector completely. So this has affected us very badly. But what I have noticed is the data were so clear from the by March itself. It was clear that children were not affected, and we could have easily gone with schools. But then what I felt, even now, some doctors, they are not sending their children even when the classes were open. I mean, from today, the schools in Assam have been closed up to class 8. The pre-primary section had never opened, but 1 to 8 also were declared off from today. And 9, 10, 11, 12 would be going on alternate days. So I guess it is 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, one day after another. So this is what I felt has been a fear of the the mass affluent class, the rich and the affluent and the middle class. When I go to villages, because of my work with the social with Swarna Bharat Party, I find that they are quite they know it very well, that we know the death rate has been officially it has been less than influenza deaths in India, and all over the world it can be comparable with influenza death. But still, the affluent class has been so afraid, and I don't know why. I mean, it's almost like as if they have been hypnotized. So yeah, we need to talk on this.
Yeah, thanks, Pankaj. So we look forward to hearing from you. I have outlined a few things that I want to hear from both of you about. I want to understand in the context of India, the operational details of what actually happened in schools, the number of days lost, the guidance for the schools to organize working studies from home, the remote learning, for example, wherever possible. The masks are a big concern for me, so I want to hear about what has been going on with masks, etc., for children, and any other impact on their official guidelines, which restricted their activity, social contacts, or whatever development. I also want to hear from you the impact that you've seen on the social development of children. A quick one, just to introduce my cousin's wife runs a children's kindergarten in Gurgaon. And she was telling me that for the last 2 years, they've been shut down, and the parents are coming in telling her that the children are now developing speech disorders, being unable to speak clearly. So that's a very big issue here to consider. So let me know about, let our viewers know about your understanding of the social development impacts. And finally, I want to understand from you, what is your understanding of the academic and general performance of children? To what extent has that suffered? And I want to be including everything in this general performance. I want to include sports, culture, leadership development, anything else apart from social, but something that we really look forward to in getting children into becoming future leaders. How has that been the case? And I will actually throw open the conversation. I'll start with Bhaskaran, who's done a lot of work in this space. He's got a bunch of slides to offer. And after that, we'll hear from Pankaj on these 3 issues. So over to Bhaskaran.
Thank you. Can I share my screen? Okay, so I have a few slides I put together based on what work I've been doing. So the impact of school shutdown on Indian society as a whole has been immense, especially on India's children has been immense. And that's what we are here to talk about. So we need to understand that although there have been school closures around the world in the name of COVID response, it has been hugely disproportionate in India. In fact, this is a website of UNESCO. You can see here the scale goes from 0 to 41 weeks. Okay, so the maximum in the scale itself is 41 weeks, while in India we are into 82nd week of school closure now. It's completely off the charts, and we are second from bottom, next only to Uganda in terms of the number of weeks of school closure throughout the country. this is extremely sad, unfortunate, cruel. I'm at a loss for words for describing what's going on. You can see here that much of Europe, which has in fact been affected much worse than India in terms of COVID, they have given priority to schools, and there in many countries they consider schools as an essential service, which it is, because how will parents go to work otherwise? On the other hand, even where in situations where everything else is open in India, schools have been shut. It's the exact opposite of what UNICEF recommended in terms of school should be the first to open and last to close. You should consider it as the last option is what UNICEF has been saying since the beginning. In India, it's the exact opposite. It's happening right now. As Pankaj has also mentioned, schools are an easy target. They just shut it. It doesn't matter whether it has impact in terms of COVID spread or not. It's almost as if it's used as a tool to strike fear among the public. So that's the situation. Another unfortunate part of school closure in India is that, so this is a map taken from a coalition called National Coalition for on Education Emergency, a coalition which was formed sometime last year to address the education emergency which is happening. It really is an emergency situation because tens of millions of children have been out of school for nearly 2 years now. So you can see here this is data from 1st October 2021 from their website, which you can click and track there. You can see that even where many states did open schools, many other states did not. It's inexplicable. I mean, the level of fear that's been created and maintained is immense, that even while some states have opened, why don't you take lessons from those which have opened and open the rest also? That doesn't seem to be the case. And another unfortunate dimension to this is that while epidemiologists and data and doctors also have been saying that smaller children are least at risk, not only for themselves, but also in terms of spread to others. Lower primary schools and pre-primary schools are extremely low risk. So even then, while higher classes are opened, lower classes remain closed, which is a double whammy, because it's the smaller kids who simply cannot sit in front of a screen and learn. It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the
Bhaskar, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, this is what a discussion I had with a parent, and he said exactly this thing. The opposite, I mean, that yeah, sure, children are not at risk, but what if they come home and give the disease to the grandparents? Although that was not true. Yeah.
Right. So if you look at worldwide, the evidence for children spreading to adults, it's extremely, the scientific evidence is almost non-existent. There are some few stray reports of this happening. The evidence is very, very weak. In fact, the evidence saying that schools do not, I'm sorry about that. My dog is yelling. Yeah, so I'll just shut the door. Huh? Just hold on. Sorry about that. So scientific evidence that schools don't cause spread has been immense. It's been building up over so many places over the last 1.5 years. So should I continue with my slides? Is that the plan? Okay.
Please continue. Please continue. Yeah.
Okay. So I have put in some key aspects to help people understand the minuscule risk of COVID for kids. So this is actually a slide this is a picture taken originally from New York Times. It was also there in a presentation made by I forget the name of the person who made the presentation. It was done to US Congress, Congressional Committee. So this is a comparison using data from the United States Center for Disease Control, CDC. The top chart presents the COVID risk comparison for under 5 years of age. And you can see that the risk of COVID is like 14 times lesser than that of drowning. The bottom chart presents the data for 5 to 15 years old. And here also you can see that COVID ranks much below other risks, which we already are used to and consider them as part of life. So it's not that COVID risk is zero. That will never be the case, but we have to compare it with things which we are already used to and don't let it dominate our life. So this is US data. The data from India is not present so much. So we have to rely on other methods. So I have put together this comparison with infant mortality rate. So one of the extremely sad aspects of poverty and hunger in India is that of infant mortality. It's extremely sad. The infant mortality rate is unbelievably high. So I have put this as a sort of a quiz comparison of what is the chance of an infant under 1 year dying in India in 2019, and the same thing in Japan in 2019. There's actually a lot of banging going on around my house. There's some construction. I'm very sorry about this.
Don't worry.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's all okay. It's all okay.
It's okay?
It's all okay.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay. Yeah, so this comparison of infant mortality in India, in Japan, and then C and D are the chance of death by COVID if an adult catches it. Okay, if you contract it, that is the infection mortality rate, infection fatality rate rather, sorry. And D is the case fatality rate, the chance of death by COVID if you test positive for it. That is what goes by the name CFR, or case fatality rate. So if you ask this to a person on the street or any parent, they're going to tell that, COVID chance of death by COVID is actually extremely high. But the fact is that the highest value here is actually the infant mortality rate in India as of 2019, which actually must have worsened due to the pandemic response. So, if you see the infection fatality rate of COVID as measured by sero surveys is actually the lowest here. The lowest is the infection fatality rate of COVID. It's even lower than the rate of infant deaths in Japan, which is supposed to be one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Yeah, so this is to give a perspective of how completely blown out of proportion this disease management has been. There is an even starker comparison of COVID-19 with another extremely sad aspect of India, which is female infanticide. It's very common, female infanticide, abortion, or sometimes even after birth, the girl children are given less priority, lesser healthcare, and they eventually die. So I did some back of the envelope calculations based on available data, and this is like a quiz which compares the chance of death of COVID in the general population. B is again the case fatality rate, chance of COVID death if you test positive, and C is chance of dying before even being born as a womb or as an infant. for a girl in India in 2011 as per 2011 census, and the same in Haryana. Haryana is supposed to be the worst female infanticide, and as you can expect, the least here is the infection fatality rate of COVID overall population, not just for kids. And the maximum here is nearly 12%. Can you imagine that? In Haryana, as per the numbers, the female infanticide rate is more than 10%. It's unbelievably high. It's a very sad and tragic thing. So what are we doing with school closure? We are worsening these problems. We are worsening social problems. We are worsening malnutrition, which is the underlying cause for all the infants dying. Most of the infants die due to malnutrition or related causes. So that's the sad reality. Here is another comparison of the infection fatality rate across all age groups. I don't want to go into a lot of details. You can see the slides later. But the point is that for an adult who is lesser than 50 years of old, he or she is safer from COVID-19 than Japanese newborns in 2019. So this is the fact, which is what the data shows. So given this, what have we done? We have done extreme school closure for nearly 2 years now. And what has been the effect of that? There is a very nice and sad detailed report prepared by researchers called the Emergency Report on School Education, Locked Out Emergency Report on School Education. It was prepared in September last year. You can see it at the link there. It was a survey of nearly 1,400 children in various underprivileged houses in various parts of the country. And it documents the extremely catastrophic consequences of this long school shutdown. And it breaks apart so many myths. There's a myth that online is education. It's a complete myth, because only 8% of the sample children in rural areas were studying online. The vast majority, 92%, were not. And in fact, more than a third of kids were not studying anything at all. So it's a complete zero for them. And the consequences of this is documented in a lot of detail in the report. About half of them were unable to read more than a few words. And I myself experienced this when, out of sheer frustration, I decided to go to some of the nearby slums and start teaching kids because schools were not opening, and I was anyway going crazy, not doing my primary job of teaching properly. And it was very clear that the gap was increasing. Fourth grade kid was not able to read a sentence which was second grade. And even if they read fluently, but they don't understand the meaning of the words they read. This report also documents cases of children not learning to write. How will they learn to write online? It's just impossible if you think about it. How does a child learn to write? Its physical presence is extremely important. It just doesn't happen without that. And the other myth is that a lot of parents don't want to send their kids to school. This is true only among the elite pockets. If you go outside of elite pockets, even just outside my own IIT campus, I have personally done surveys of people standing at bus stops, people in slums. There, over 95% of parents were ready to send their kids to school months back. So that is another complete myth, which is broken apart by this report, careful study which has been done. Very sad findings, of course. Books have been written on the problem of hunger and malnutrition in India, even before the pandemic and the pandemic response. So the first, I cite many links here. The first one talks about malnutrition. This is a 2018 news report. 9 lakh children below the age of 5 die every year. 9 lakh. So these numbers, it's often difficult to comprehend. Okay. The one silver lining of COVID is that everybody relates to COVID numbers. The number of COVID deaths in India, the counted COVID deaths, is less than half of the number of children below the age of 5 who die every year. So now you can imagine the level of disproportionate response that we have undertaken, worsening the problem of malnutrition. So as early as November 2020, there was a report saying that 115 million children were at risk of malnutrition. So the total number of children in India is about 30 million. Sorry, 300 million. So this is like 1/3, more than 1/3 of children were at risk of malnutrition due to the lockdown related response. That was the report in November 2020. And of course, lockdown continued well after that. So the situation must be far worse now. There have been reports of severe malnourishment coming out even during the pandemic. I cite a few links here. Nearly 18 lakh children severely malnourished was the report which came just 2 months back. 9 lakh severely acute malnourished children, and there was, so the sad thing is malnutrition is intricately linked to school closure, because most schools in India have this midday meal program where children facing malnutrition are given supplementary food, nutritious food, which helps fight this huge problem of malnutrition. And the midday meal program was completely stopped for months, and even where started, it was a lot of disruptions. And even where school started, the midday meal program was not started. This is a very sad report that I cite here from Uttar Pradesh, where even when school started, they did not restart the midday meal program. It's such a cruel thing to even fathom, that this huge problem has been completely sidelined and made worse because of the school shutdown. So this is the issue of malnutrition. What about school dropout? So if schools are not there, a lot of kids drop out. And there was a UNICEF report back in 2021 January itself, which said that the number of dropouts is likely to be increased by a huge number of 24 million across the world. And all these sad statistics, India will be above average. So, India, it will likely be several millions of children dropping out permanently. A study in November 2020 across several states concluded that as many as 2/3 of children may drop out of school in India. And even when schools opened after the second wave, there were staggering statistics coming out of very few students re-enrolling from various states, Haryana, Karnataka. I cite some of these numbers here. So school dropout is a problem. So this is all intricately connected to literacy, poverty, and healthcare. If a person doesn't earn, how is the person supposed to take care of his or her health? And it is well known that if the girl child is missing out on education, it affects the next generation. So not only is the healthcare of the current generation being affected due to school closure, we are also affecting, deeply damaging the healthcare of the next generation. Other social problems. if children are out of school, what happens? So related to the problem of school dropout is, what do kids do if they drop out of school? They get into child labor. And in the case of girl children, parents want to marry them off at an early age, child marriage. There have been studies which show huge increases in child marriages due to the lockdown situation. And another unfortunate thing which happens to children is in families where the situation is not all right, there are instances of domestic violence and child abuse. Even in cases where elite households which have laptops and tablets and smartphones and so on, there have been instances of cyberbullying due to child abuse over the internet and social media, because children have been spending too much time on devices and parents don't have sufficient time to oversee that. There have been instances of child abuse over the internet. Huge increases in child labor. Reports are starting to just come out on increases in child labor. We must remember that child labor is such a heart-wrenching thing. A child working for earning a livelihood, and that completely destroys the child's life. And then we compare, what are we doing all this, inflicting all this harm for? Is just it doesn't make any sense at all. LA Times reported in September 2021 that several decades of progress against in the fight against child labor have been reversed because of this lockdown response and school shutdown response. Huge increases in child labor have been reported in Al Jazeera just recently. Child labor increase in India has been reported by Al Jazeera. So, I wrote a letter to various authorities way back in May, starting in May. Individually, I wrote and then got together with several others and wrote several other letters. One of the responses which was given was, schools are not open because COVID jabs are not available for kids. Even though my letter specifically covered this aspect and conveyed that, well, schools have been open in so many other countries, even before the vaccine trial started. So why should it be dependent on jabs? So this is a question that's currently being, it's occupying the minds of several parents. Should COVID-19 jabs be given to kids? So here, I have, of course, I am not a medical professional, but I understand data and statistics well, and a lot of vaccine trials are to do with data and data analysis. So I understand that aspect reasonably to comment on it. I have read the Pfizer's own trial on kids. This is a brief summary of the trial done by Pfizer on Pfizer jabs for kids in the age range 5 to 11. Although, people keep claiming that even one child's life saved is worth it. Well, certainly yes. But the problem is that the trials themselves do not show any instance of even severe COVID. Severe COVID itself is so rare in kids that the trial was woefully underpowered to even find an instance of severe COVID. This is a problem of design itself. They knew that the problem of severe COVID is rare, and still the trials have been underpowered. So going by the trial, we cannot tell that the jab will reduce the risk of even these rare problems. The other problem which is cited for kids in the context of COVID is this multisystem inflammatory syndrome, MIS in children, MISC. So even this, they did not find any instance of this in the trial. So it reduced from 0 to 0. So how can you tell that the jab is effective in reducing that? You cannot. On the other hand, of course, there were adverse events termed as severe adverse events in the report itself. In the report given by Pfizer to FDA, there have been severe adverse events in the vaccine group, of course. And all of these, we don't know the long-term effects. So given all this, it's not at all clear why FDA even approved these jabs for kids. So this is with respect to the kids aged 5 to 11. What about the higher age children, adolescents, 12 to 25? There was another trial conducted by Pfizer for that age group. Here also, the problem of severe COVID was so rare that the trial did not find a single instance of severe COVID. And there was a letter in the British Medical Journal, which again pointed out that the severe adverse events are there of the vaccine, of the jab in adolescents. So the risk-benefit analysis simply does not add up for justifying jab for, as per this trial, even under 25. Now, what about in India? So in India, you know, some prominent people have been going around telling that we need to vaccinate our kids. So there was an article written by virologist Dr. Jacob John and Dr. M.S. Seshadri. It appeared in late October. They made a case for why we need to vaccinate our kids. Now, there are two kinds of reasons they give. One is to prevent virus transmission for societal benefit, because kids can spread infection to adults. This was one set of reasons given. And another reason was that even though COVID is rare, you can have severe COVID in kids also. And this multi-system inflammatory syndrome, as well as long COVID in children, is possible. So there are several questions which pop up immediately. The first is an ethical question. If you are giving a reason of jabbing kids for a benefit to adults, it's absurd. How can you give that as a reason for jabbing kids? Medical intervention in kids must be there only for the benefit of the kids. That's the ethical question. The logical question is, anyway, the adults have access to the same vaccine. So why do kids also need to be jabbed? It's unclear. And then the scientific question is, it is clear by now that none of the current vaccines prevent transmission, prevent infection and transmission. So in this case, I mean, the logic simply falls apart, because kids can still, even if you jab them, they can get infected and spread to adults to the same extent as unjabbed. And then with respect to the second reason given, there is a methodological question. The Pfizer trial I pointed out had about 2,250 children in the trial, which itself was underpowered. The vaccines which have been approved for emergency use for kids in India have trial sizes which are even lower. So the methodology simply falls apart. You're just not using the correct methodology to solve these rare problems. So the whole set of questions, and there is no logic in the statement that we need to vaccinate kids. So where do we go from here? I have launched this campaign, which I call Happy 2022, Happy for Kids Too, around the new year. We want to wish all our children, not only in India, but around the world, a completely normal 2022, a happy and normal 2022. Each of us have enjoyed a normal and enjoyable childhood. The same is deserved by every kid today. This is our campaign website, happy22kids.org, and our mantra is join the chain for children's cheer. I think this lockdown response has gone long enough. Breaking the chain of transmission, people have tried, and it clearly has not worked. Even in much sparsely populated countries like Australia, all this lockdown has not broken the chain of transmission because it's airborne. The virus is airborne. So we are continuing to harm kids with this kind of unscientific response. That should stop, and we all should join the chain and work towards children's cheer. That's the line we are taking. We ask that all schools must be opened. Not only that, Sanjeev originally mentioned what is the situation with respect to schools in India. So I talked about school closure. Even when schools were open, they have been restricted to a few hours a day, at most 50% attendance, and no extracurricular activities. Just, what kind of a school is that? No arts, no sports, no dance, no music. That's not school. That's certainly not an enjoyable school. That's not how children should go to school. Children should have all normal activities resumed at the very earliest. It is their constitutional right, and it is also their birthright. We specifically ask, as part of the campaign, that this social distancing is all harm and no benefit for kids. Kids need to interact socially. That's how they learn. That's how they develop. And there's no benefit to kids of social distancing, so it must stop. Likewise, there has been no COVID emergency for kids anywhere in the world. So emergency use jabs for all kids simply does not make any sense. It is all risk and no benefit has been shown by the current trials. And the third thing we ask is that kids without symptoms should not be tested. There are many places around the world today which keep testing kids for COVID. This is causing huge psychological harm. It is like saying you are unclean, you are dirty, you are sick, and you keep testing. It causes a lot of anxiety, and there's no peace of mind for kids, no peace of mind for parents, anxious teachers and principals. For what? Epidemiologists have been telling from the beginning that asymptomatic COVID testing is completely pointless. This statement has been currently signed by over 320 people, including leading epidemiologists and doctors, various academicians, parents, and a lot of concerned citizens. And I invite one and all to join the chain for children's cheer. What should the government do going forward? Well, for 2 years now, we have been trying to avoid COVID. And by now, it should be clear that it is not possible to avoid. We need to understand this, unclog our brains, unpanic people, unscare them, and unlock society. This is the way forward. And we should care more for those who are sick and unscare the others, especially parents. Now, given the 2 years of propaganda, it's not going to be easy to unscare parents, especially those who are extremely concerned about COVID for kids. It's a very emotional battle. So they're not going to be open to suggestions to school opening and so on. That's exactly what's going on now. So in the meantime, at least the vast majority of parents who do want to send their kids to school must have that option.
Thanks for that, Bhaskaran. This has been a phenomenal, I would say, a very illuminating presentation. Thank you for the work you've done and the work you're doing. I would now pass on to Pankaj to cover the same topics, basically anything that you've left out, but also being directly involved in schools as a personal anecdotal experiences also, just to supplement some of the things you've said would be very welcome. So over to you, Pankaj.
Yeah. Bhaskaran has already given a very detailed presentation, and it tallies absolutely with our observations. And because we have this data from also and connect with other schools, with lots of schools across India and definitely Assam. So we know this. I mean, last year, session 2021, we lost almost 150 days. Those were online classes. So as you had pointed out, Haskaran, that children there, especially in the lower primary classes, they learn how to read and write. So obviously, without the presence of teachers, because this is mostly face-to-face, learning how to read, write, do the basic arithmetic. Those are the things. Those cannot be done online. I mean, that is, say, 9 and 10, high school, senior high schools. So those students might be able to learn a little. However, in the lower primary classes, it's absolutely devastating. And that's what we have seen across all our schools, all the schools of the world, as has been reported. But I can tell you personally that it has been, the learning levels have really gone down. Especially, say, my two daughters, they study, one studies in class 4, one in class 11. And then because we live together, I with my cousins, my sister's children. So we have got about 9 kids, but some of them have gone to university now. So those children who are still there in schools, in the school, that is in my school. So they have been, my younger daughter, she is always after me, when the schools will open. And then since from today, the school closures have happened. So she says, oh God, again, the schools will not happen. I'll miss my friends. So all those things, the social part has been affected greatly. We had done a seminar that why do schools matter? I mean, are schools required at all? I mean, there is such for private schools, there is such animosity in the media and among the government, apparatus, as it is that we have always felt that whether schools are necessary. But now these questions need to be asked, whether schools are necessary. I mean, if schools are not necessary at all, we can move online, why there should be schools at all. But then we have seen that there are certain functions which cannot be done online at all. All the data that you have placed, it's so well known. I mean, the great, you spoke about the focused protection part. So the Great Barrington Declaration, the 3 scientists, they had placed it and signed by hundreds of other epidemiologists, the medical doctors and scientists, including Michael Levitt. We know John Ioannidis, who is somewhat left-oriented, but even he was saying that lockdowns make no sense. So we have this data. But my biggest, what would I say? I'm surprised. I am so surprised, so saddened that mostly doctors and the affluent class, I don't know, maybe probably because they can teach something to their kids, and they can afford to do things without going outside. With the help of technology, they can do lots of their things. Their income must have taken a hit, but that hit has been insignificant. And I would say it is absolutely about the income level by class. The poor, who are many, have been so badly affected. And the biggest surprise, or rather no surprise, the media has also, because the mainstream media has gone completely into the hands of those who move the wheels of power. So the media, I mean, every established newspaper and TV, definitely, without any question. So they are so much into scare. And privately, if you talk to the reporters, they all know. I speak to reporters of established newspapers, I mean, national newspapers. They say that I believe what you are saying. I know what you are saying. For example, this reporter who works in Times of India, he has a young son. He knows very well. But in the newspapers, all these reporters will be talking only about how to scare people. So media is one big thing, and how they have ignored the majority. And what majority? I mean, absolute majority. People have died on the streets while walking. Small kids have died. I mean, 15-year-old, I mean, adolescent kids. So 15-year-old, 16-year-old, they died. And nobody is bothered by that. They are also fixated by one number. It's just like people have been hypnotized. one of my friends, he told me, let economy jai bhar mein, something like that, right? I mean, let the economy be damned. But when you go to a hospital, you go for a MRI or a CAT scan, then you will have to pay money. I mean, without money, as you had said, Bhaskaran, that without money, how do you treat? How do you treat your child when they are sick? So, say in Guwahati, how many PET scan machines are there? There were none a few years back. Today, there are 2-3 PET scans because our economy cannot afford it. Assam's economy is so bad, so we are so far behind. We do not have those machines. So economy determines the kind of treatment that will be provided, the kind of diagnostic tools that will be used. This is basic thing. So the learning levels have gone down everywhere. This has been always the problem, as Asar has shown it for years on end. National achievement surveys have shown that class 8 student cannot do a class 5 maths or English. So basic learning levels have been always low, but it has been devastating. And I am absolutely, I fail to understand why it has happened. It is so basic. When the Great Barrington Declaration came up, I signed. I mean, I studied, we understand the data. How many people died? How many people died? In 2 years, today, it is 4,83,000. And in these 2 years, 4 lakh children died of diarrhea. 4 lakh children died of diarrhea and 4,83,000 total death. So where people have simply forgotten the lower middle class and below, and they are totally, their mind is fixated. And the more well-off they are, the doctors have not sent their children to schools. They are absolutely fixated with one number, that is COVID. And they have destroyed this generation. The social skills, their depression, the children are absolutely, the use of mobile in the wrong manner. So the things that should not be seen, mobile has become a disease for these children. We have seen that how, or you can say that some children, I don't know how they are learning. Let's say my daughter studies in class 4. So when online classes will happen, the kind of language that is being spoken, it is unbelievable. You cannot. So we have, this is a true statement, that we have destroyed this generation, and for absolutely nothing. The real concern that was expressed to me by a doctor said one thing, that what if the children come home and give the disease to others? A doctor. And what is a, he's also a teacher in a medical college, so a professor. Now, they are worried about the children coming home and giving the disease to the parents, to the grandparents. Yet the data is so clear that a child is more likely to die falling off the staircase or a ladder than dying of COVID. This is the hard data. But how has it not entered our head? What has happened to us? What has happened? I don't know when people will wake up. And I'm so depressed because I have kids studying. I have hundreds of kids in my school, and we have got thousands of kids who are studying in my friends' schools. So we are a small community of school management. We talk every single day. Each of the, for want of a better word, school owners, each of these school owners, we are totally at a loss to understand what is happening. The more low earner a person is, the more eager they are to send their children to school. The more higher up they are, the less they want to see. The high fees taking school, they have almost no attendance. The lower the fees is, the higher is the attendance. This is the trend everywhere. So we are at a loss, and we know very well, at least up to class 5, I can tell you that online class has hardly any impact. 1 and 2, absolutely none, I would say. 3, 4, my daughter, her learning level had gone down. And because we run the school, we sometimes take her and, you know, directly put it there. Some teachers actually asked that, are you not afraid? We said, no, yeah, how can you be afraid? See, there are other risks which are more severe than COVID. So at least thank God, our children are safe from COVID. This has never ever happened for an imaginary thing. That too, after having a real test area of Sweden, who never had a single day of school closure up to 16-year-old. That is our corresponding class 10. Not a single day of school closure for COVID. And yet not a single child died or severe hospitalization. We have the data. But if you say about, when I say to my doctor friends that, well, this has happened. No, don't talk to me about Sweden. They are developed. So people have simply shut off their brain, and I don't know when it will come. I know our brains will open up. So I'm at a loss.
Thanks, Pankaj. That's a very good summary to substantiate what Bhaskaran has reported, as well as I guess you provided some anecdotes which are based on personal experience, which is really good. I also wanted to get your view, Pankaj, on Bhaskaran as well after this, if he has any, because the teachers, I worry about the teachers as well. Can we just summarize in this 2 to 3 minutes about the impact on teachers, and then we'll move on to the closing of this session.
Yeah, I have spoken with my teachers very recently online in Google Meet. So classes have happened in Google Meet, are happening in Google Meet. So the way our teachers prepare lesson plans. So this has been very tough on teachers, and some part of is compliance. Let's say a student writes, and the biggest worry is, as you know, it is an axiom in the teaching fraternity that you need to spend more of your time on the children whose productivity is less. I mean, a child who is already writing well or playing well, the teacher has to spend less time on them. So you need to spend more time on the low achieving students. And now, because of lockdown, these children simply switches on whatever they are on, mobile or laptop or tablet, and they would be doing whatever they want. Because of the bandwidth, children will be asked to switch off their cameras, because once you put on your camera, this sort of static ting tang, it starts. So you ask your children to shut down their camera, and so they take the advantage. In the in-person classes, they would be under the teacher's observation. So they would be always after to say, have you done, are you writing? So the teacher makes them, it is the teacher's job to make the children read, write, think, read, write, think. The question is how? In the previous days, you would take a stick, you read, you write, and in the process, you would hopefully think. So previously it was a stick. Now you need to create an atmosphere where children will read, write, think, read, write, think. Now, if the teachers cannot ensure that your children are actually reading and writing, so the excuses are today such that teachers cannot take control over those excuses. And therefore, the low achievers are going even lower. So online has been even worse for the low achieving students.
Yeah. So I think that's really consistent with what we've seen in the Australian data, where interestingly, there is the only country in the world, apart from I think one more, where the results of studies on students' performance show that there was virtually very little change between 2019 and 2020, which is astonishing. We'll come to that separately if required in a separate conversation. Can I get your views, Bhaskaran? I know you are not directly, but you taught in slums and so on. So what, and you are of course not interacting with teachers, but do you know anything about, because teachers' professional development and such things, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I don't have thoughts on teachers the impact on teachers, except some anecdotes where I know that teachers have been, what should I say? They have also been mentally very disturbed because of the lack of social connect with kids. Those are anecdotal. Yeah, I mean, I myself as a teacher feel extremely distressed, have been feeling distressed because, and in fact, I call it cheating. I become a cheater as opposed to a teacher. Online is cheating. It's not teaching. It's cheating the kids. It's cheating yourself.
Indeed. Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point. So there we are. We basically covered off a pretty wide range of topics today. It confirms the overall findings of the UNICEF that this particular generation, and you know what Pankaj said, is basically we have destroyed them actively for no rhyme or reason. We know that the risk is very low. So $17 trillion is a very large number. These children, particularly the ones who are low performers, the ones who are very poor, they're dropping out. They'll get worse. They will not be able to even get the jobs that they were likely to have got in the past, which is going to impoverish the world. In addition to as everybody knows that economic impacts also harm your health. So anybody who's poor then has a lower life expectancy. So in my cost benefit analysis that I'm working on with GG Foster, we're talking about the whole issue. We're not trying to estimate exactly how many life years will be reduced, but there are a lot of estimates coming out about the reduction in longevity of these children. So we're basically actively harming children. I think the message from here for the government, you've already got it there, Bhaskar. I think I encourage everybody to join your program, your activity, for India, to really move the social. I really don't know what to say, because the elites are the ones who need to hear this message, but they've shut their minds. But we need to somehow try to influence them. We need to influence government officials. I'm hoping this particular video will be heard by maybe 5 or 10 people who are influential. Hopefully they will start thinking. I think we need to keep this conversation going. So I think that's all I have for this session. If any last comments from any of you, please go ahead.
Yeah, so as Pankaj pointed out earlier, I think we are in a hypnotic state, the vast majority of the population. We don't realize the harm that we're doing to children. In fact, I've been seeing some videos on psychology. There's a professor of psychology called Professor Matthias Desmet from University of Ghent in Belgium. He calls this mass psychosis, mass formation psychosis. And that's what we are dealing with right now. And I will end on a positive, constructive note. Let us hope that our concern for our children will help break the psychosis sooner than later. We need to do this for our children. People need to wake up and let our concern for well-being of children override everything else.
Well said. Thanks for that, Bhaskar. Any last comments, Pankaj?
Yeah, I mean, this ability to think critically, it is dead. It's dead. I hope we all, wake up very soon. And to my mind, it's like probably a grab for power, because those scientists who are not in the government, if you look at Sunetra Gupta or Martin Kulrov or Jay Bhattacharya or John Ioannidis, the independent academicians, the scientists, they have been telling right from day one. But the scientists who are in government panels, government bodies, they are providing things, providing ammunition to the political leaders that allows them to grab more power. I don't know if it is about collectivism, if about authoritarianism, that, the government always, doesn't matter what government, during the time of Akbar or King John or whatever, and then now, governments always desire to have more power. The role of constitution is to limit that power. So I think the people in power have got a very good opportunity to grab more and more power. and the scientist in the employment of government is providing them that ammunition. So
yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. And that brings us back to the ideology of Swarna Bharat Party very quickly, where we believe in a very limited government. We believe in the constitutional fundamental rights, which have been completely destroyed in India. Human rights have been trampled very badly this time. And of course, nobody talks about them. Children's rights are actually more important than even that rights maybe of adults. And that's all there in all the documents that we have, international documents, and we've ignored it completely. So I guess the other point I was going to raise, you pointed out about a scientist. I was a Indian Administrative Service officer. My batchmate Rajiv Gauba is the cabinet secretary, which is the senior most cabinet bureaucrat today. I will send him a copy of this video. I've actually shared a number of my Times of India articles with him. I unfortunately haven't got a response. I believe that the IAS, I'm in touch with hundreds of them. Most of the IAS officers fall in the category, Pankaj, that you mentioned, who are basically with a proclivity for authoritarianism. They believe they know better than others. They're also the ones at the high end of the spectrum, not really affected by these things. They have plenty of servants. They can work from home. They can get deliveries of food at home. They don't really care. So we are actually managed very badly in India by these bureaucrats, by the government scientists, and the actual good scientists and thinkers like Bhaskar Raman are not being heard.